Kia ora, and welcome to the 73rd International Communication Association Conference, Pacific Regional Hub 2023, hosted by Center for Culture-Centered Approach to Research and Evaluation, Massey University, Aotearoa, New Zealand, on centering indigeneity, methodologies of decolonization. I, Debalina Datta, am excited to introduce an excellent lineup of speakers who would be presenting their papers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Leon Salter, who will be presenting the first paper of the day.
Kia ora, thanks, Debalina.
He's frozen. We cannot hear you.
I think we lost you, Leon. We can't hear you or see you.
Hey, sorry, the internet connection's really bad.
Same thing again.
So the comprehensive government response to COVID-19 was oriented around the discourse of the team of 5 million. But that negated the experiences of many on the margins, such as platform workers, who lacked employment protections or rights while being unofficially classed as essential workers. And they had heightened health. You want me to start again? But introduce the paper that me and myself and Mohan have written, the techno-political structure of platform work, precarity and communication inequality in Aotearoa and New Zealand during COVID-19. So the comprehensive government response to COVID-19 was recognised globally. Economic support packages oriented around a discourse of a team of 5 million. But wasn't experienced universally. Platform workers were unofficially classed as essential workers while lacking basic employment protections or rights, while being expected to sort of work through many of the lockdowns while most of us were safe at home in our homes. They had to work, often had to work because otherwise they wouldn't get paid, with heightened health risks and economic precarity. And at the same time, they lacked the collective communicative infrastructure to voice that situation. So for the culture-centered approach, theories of emancipatory social change must locate within the nexus of structure, culture, and agency. But culture is the site where voices from the margins gain agency to break apart those oppressive structures. And when the techno-political structure is kind of economic alliance of big tech and governments shapes to constrain that agency and constrain that voice, becomes a problem. Whereas the dominant situates technology as outside of society and politics. The idea of the techno-political structure includes the idea that technological infrastructure is far from neutral, but it's shaped by political choices. In other words, the light touch regulation that's been crucial for the gig economy's growth, and the kind of lobbying that's been illustrated in the recent Uber files, revealing the kind of secret lobbying operation Uber have been employed in their early days to sort of conquer the world. And then once they get big, they cement that hegemonic position through the technological affordances, things like network effects, where they create, they get so big, they create sort of networks together, which prevents other platforms emerging. And then they use that size to collect massive amounts of data, and instead of that data being publicly available, it's used for private profit. And then they use that data as well for algorithmic management, the sort of manipulation of the workers to be in the right place and at the right time. In other words, they become powerful political actors. And that structure creates what we call communication inequality. It's a concept that's been mostly applied to health communication. In the CCA includes that health communication definition, which talks about lack of access to crucial health information or inequitous access. Goes beyond, CCA goes beyond that, talk about lack of access to voice infrastructure, which creates agency and has effects on material positioning, status and well-being. So onto the empirical section. We did 25 Zoom interviews with rideshare and delivery workers. They were in depth, between 45 and 90 minutes. Employing the CCA approach, deep listening with humility and reflexivity. Talking about their health problems, their political questions and solutions. So we had 4 themes, which were information restriction, indirect management, unilateral term setting, and precaritization. Firstly, information restriction, talking about how the techno-political structure actually works to restrict crucial information that drivers need to make money on the platform. Specifically with Uber, when they accept the ride on their phone, when they're offered the ride on their phone, they're not given all the information that's needed. They're only given sort of the name of the passenger and the location they need to pick up. They're not given the information, other information like where the passenger is going, e.g. how long the trip is going to be and how profitable it's going to be. As this driver, Isaac is their pseudonym, they're saying, when we accept trips, we're not told what the destination is. All we get told is how many minutes away is the pickup, destination from where we are, so we don't know where they're going until we pick them up when we start the trip. And that becomes even worse of a problem, as it's not just economic or place information that becomes channeled through the platform, through the structure, but it's also health information, and specifically COVID information, COVID health information during the COVID crisis. And whereas other employees might get sort of training on what to do, how to keep themselves safe during the COVID crisis, they got it all through the platform, which is via emails. So as Isaac's saying, again, we've got emails and stuff saying, you know, wear a mask and hand sanitizer, pretty basic stuff. And the suggestion not to use their air conditioning, but to have air coming from outside. And again, Keenan here, who worked for Delivereasy, which is a New Zealand delivery platform, when I asked them, did he get any training? Wouldn't say training. We got like an email from the boss about how deliveries can be run during the lockdown, and it was maintained a very individualized approach about maintaining their own personal hygiene and through the use of sanitizer and masks, which of course they'd have to pay for themselves as independent contractors. But there's also indirect management, which includes algorithmic management, is reduced to that. It's also loyalty schemes. So there's both the carrot of incentives and the stick of threats and discipline. It's like Uber Pro, which is like a loyalty scheme, which allows access to crucial information that I mentioned earlier, but only if they're part of the loyalty scheme and they build up through the status tiers. And the problem with that is, in order to get those higher status tiers, they have to like have a low cancellation rate. And if they have a low cancellation rate, that means taking unprofitable jobs. So again, reducing their ability to make a sustainable living. And the dealings with Uber and the other platforms were very dehumanized and automated. If they went up status tiers with Uber Pro, they privilege of actually getting to speak to a human being at a call center. Otherwise, they'd have to speak to an AI bot. But it gave the overall impression of a kind of unhuman, immovable, oblique structure that they didn't question. As Finlay's putting it here, we just sort of went along with the structure because there was no possibility of pushing back, of having a conversation, of having a dialogue, or having a complaint, or you know, bargaining with. Just got on with the structure and got on with it. As he's saying, you know this and you don't question that. That's kind of like how it is for you. You're part of it. You're part of this kind of dehumanized structure. You know how this is going to be, so you sort of like it or lump it. There's no point question. There's no human component to question. There's no one to question. And that's sort of linked to the unilateral term setting, like where you would have in an employment relationship where you might be a member of the union and have collective bargaining rights, or even with an individual agreement, you would have some kind of like negotiation skills. But with Uber, there's no negotiation because it's more like on social media, when you use social media and you click yes or no to accept the terms and conditions, accept, and then if you click no, you basically can't use the platform anymore. And the difference is, in Facebook, it means not being able to chat to your friends, but with an Uber driver, it means losing your job. It means not having income if you click no. So basically, you either, as Finlay was saying, you either yes, you agree, you get on with it, or you no, and you're off the platform. And monologic rather than dialogic drivers as partners with no bargaining or consultative. Do they sort of do it in this kind of obvious way? They change the terms and conditions where you said yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. They might also tweak the algorithm without actually the drivers even knowing about it, which changes their terms and conditions. Many drivers said that when they came in, it seemed like they were getting a lot more money for their drives and their deliveries. And then as time went on, they'd slowly decrease the rate at what they'd get paid. But it was a kind of subtle, slow decrease, so they would hardly notice. And the fourth theme is precaritization. This is very noticeable over COVID, where rideshare income declined, obviously because a lot of people were traveling around a lot less during the lockdowns, but also after the lockdowns when people were concerned about COVID. And their income became much more unpredictable. Many drivers before COVID relied on surge pricing, which is when in an area where there's a shortage, where there's a high demand and shortage of drivers to supply, the rate that they would get paid would go up 3 or 4 times their normal rate, and that was the only time where they'd make a good profit. Otherwise, at the standard rate, they'd only be just about breaking even. But COVID meant that the number of surge pricing was decreased substantially. There'd be hardly any surge pricing about, and where you would find it would be a lot less predictable. The delivery drivers we spoke to, even then, while a lot of people were ordering food from their homes and requiring food delivery, you think it would be a boom to delivery drivers. Even then, a lot of them, they got sucked in with the promise of like high amounts of work and a lot of money, and that they could make a lot of money. But then, as I mentioned, they'd come in and they'd kind of paid a high rate, and then the algorithm would get tweaked, and their pay would go down and down. And also, they weren't compensated for the increased risk of working in a pandemic and their liabilities for rideshare drivers, for Uber drivers having an expensive car. Because of the economic pressures, they were pressured to take shortcuts. You know, there might not be, you know, so which caused increased risk, health and safety risk. They'd go over the speed limit, or they'd park in a legal spot, or something like that, or they might not do contactless delivery because they want to just rush and get as many deliveries done in a short space of time. So conclusions, the platform is a place of employment, but also the site of the information distribution, which gives the platforms undue control over workers, allows them to use that kind of techno-political structure to really impose their control over workers, giving them few spaces for resistance or dialogue. And the negotiations of that techno-political structure by the drivers were shaped by their communication inequality, which sediments their precarity and therefore their material inequality. And their exploitative conditions, already pretty exploitative before the pandemic, were exasperated by the pandemic crisis, by their situation as independent contractors with few employment rights and no bargaining. On the other hand, all techno-political structures are contingent. They can be challenged, and this is what we're seeing at the moment. New Zealand drivers are turning to the court through support of their union and First Union, and they're beginning to win employment rights in a court case. But there is a long way to go for them to get sort of real employment rights to redress that communication inequality and material. Okay, thank you very much. That's it from me.